You ever meet someone who just needs to feel powerful? Someone who looks at a quiet, harmless person and decides to make their life miserable just because they think they can. Yeah? Our neighbor thought my mom was an easy target. He reported her to the city for an illegal structure in our backyard, hoping to scare her into tearing it down. But what he didn't realize was that if you start digging into other people's lives, sometimes they start digging into yours too. And 2 weeks later, the city forced him to destroy his brand new $40,000 pool. Before we get into the story, if you enjoy satisfying revenge stories where karma hits exactly the right person, make sure to hit the like button and subscribe. And while you're listening, ask yourself, what would you have done in this situation? Because honestly, I didn't plan revenge at first, but once I saw what he did to my mom, I couldn't just let it go. I live with my mom. And before anyone jumps to conclusions, it's not some basement-dwelling situation. Life just worked out that way. My dad passed away a few years ago, and I stayed to help her with the house. Bills, repairs, yard work, all the stuff he used to handle. My mom is the quietest person you'll ever meet. She keeps to herself, never complains, never argues. If someone parks halfway across our driveway, she'll just say, "Oh well, they probably didn't notice." She's that kind of person, the kind people usually like or ignore, but unfortunately, sometimes people like that attract the wrong kind of attention. About 6 months ago, we got a new neighbor. His name was Mark. You know the type immediately. Brand new SUV in the driveway, always walking around the neighborhood like he owned it. The kind of guy who would stand in his yard with his arms crossed, just watching, judging. The first interaction my mom had with him should have been a warning sign. She was watering her garden when he walked over to the fence. Not a friendly wave, not a, "Hey, nice to meet you," just this stiff, annoyed expression. And the first thing he said was, "Do you know that shed in your backyard might not be up to code? No hello, no introduction, just that." My mom blinked, confused. "Oh, that shed? It's been there for years." And that was true. My dad had it installed almost a decade ago. He went through the whole permit process, inspections, paperwork, everything. But Mark just shrugged. "Well, I've seen people get fined for stuff like that." Then he walked away, like he'd just delivered some kind of warning. My mom brushed it off at first, but a week later, a city inspector showed up. I remember the knock on the door. My mom opened it, and there stood this guy with a clipboard and a badge. City inspection. "We received a report about an unpermitted structure on your property." My mom's face immediately fell, not because she thought she did anything wrong, but because she hates confrontation. She hates trouble. She hates feeling like she's done something bad even when she hasn't. The inspector walked around to the backyard, checked the shed, measured a few things, looked through some paperwork. Then, after about 10 minutes, he just nodded and said, "Everything's permitted. You're good." And he left. Simple. Done. But when I stepped outside later that afternoon, I saw Mark leaning against his fence, watching, that smug little half smile on his face. Like he'd just pulled off something clever, like he'd successfully put us in our place. That's when something inside me shifted. Because here's the thing, you can mess with me. I don't care. But my mom, she spent the rest of that evening quietly worrying. "What if they come back?" she asked. "What if something else isn't right?" I had to dig out the old permit paperwork just to reassure her everything was fine. And that's when I realized something. People like Mark don't stop. If they think they can intimidate you once, they'll do it again. So I decided to look into him a little. Nothing crazy, just curiosity. And that's when I noticed something interesting. Mark had recently installed a pool, a big one of those in-ground setups with concrete around it and fancy lighting. It looked brand new, and if you know anything about city permits, pools are a huge deal. You can't just dig a hole and fill it with water. There are setback rules, property line requirements, utility easements, safety regulations. So one afternoon I walked out back and really looked at it. Something felt off. The pool seemed really close to the fence, like suspiciously close, and that's when the idea hit me. What if the guy who reported my mom for a violation had one of his own? I didn't jump to conclusions. Instead, I started doing something Mark clearly hadn't expected. Research, city zoning website, property maps, permit records. And after about an hour of digging, I found something beautiful, his pool permit. Or rather, the lack of one, no permit filed, no approval, nothing. But that wasn't even the best part, according to the city map. Part of his pool was built directly over utility easement. Now, if you don't know what that is, it basically means the city or utility companies have the legal right to access that area. You're not supposed to build permanent structures there, especially not something massive like a pool. And the property line setback? Yeah, his pool was way too close. At that point, I just leaned back in my chair and laughed, because suddenly Mark's smug little grin made sense. He thought nobody would check his stuff. He thought everyone else was the problem. So I did exactly what he did to us. I filed a report with the city, except I didn't just complain. I attached photos, measurements, screenshots of zoning codes, highlighted sections. I made it easy, very easy. Then I waited. For about a week, nothing happened. Then one morning, a city truck pulled up outside Mark's house. 2 inspectors got out, clipboards, measuring tape, the works. I watched from the kitchen window while pretending to drink coffee. They walked straight to the backyard, and about 5 minutes later, I heard shouting. Mark, angry, loud. The kind of angry where you know someone just got really bad news. For the next half hour, they inspected everything, measured distances, took photos, and eventually they handed him some paperwork. Mark's face turned this deep shade of red. He looked like he was about to explode. A couple days later, the official notice came. The city determined his pool violated multiple building codes, too close to the property line, built over a utility easement, no proper permit, which meant he had 2 options: move the pool or remove it. Now, if you've ever seen an in-ground pool, you know moving it isn't exactly possible. So 2 weeks later, a construction crew showed up, jackhammers, excavators, concrete saws. They demolished the entire thing. The pool, the decking, the plumbing, everything. Then they filled the hole with dirt. Total loss, about $40,000 gone. Just like that. And the best part? Our shed, the one he reported, it's perfectly visible from his backyard. Every single day now, Mark stands out there sometimes, looking at that empty patch of dirt where his pool used to be, and right beyond it, our completely legal shed, still standing, still perfectly fine. I actually ran into him once after everything happened. He was out front getting his mail. I walked past with my dog, and he just glared at me. You know that look people give when they know exactly what happened, but they can't prove anything. He didn't say a word. Neither did I. But honestly, I didn't need to. Because sometimes revenge isn't about confrontation. Sometimes it's about consequences. And the consequence of trying to bully a quiet old woman was losing $40,000. Meanwhile, my mom, she sleeps peacefully now. No more worrying about inspectors. No more stress. Just quiet nights. And a shed that's exactly where it's supposed to be. Funny thing about people who go looking for problems. Sometimes they end up finding their own. Mark wanted to scare us. Instead, he gave the city a reason to look a little closer at his own backyard. And karma did the rest. If you enjoyed this story, hit that like button and subscribe for more real revenge and karma stories. And tell me in the comments, what would you have done? Would you have ignored the neighbor or reported the pool too? Because sometimes justice doesn't need yelling. It just needs the right paperwork.